back to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. This week, our featured food is olive oil, a staple of Middle Eastern cuisine, and our recipe is nice and simple, but it can really add some depth and complexity to your dishes and really seem like you've taken your cooking up a step. So today we are making garlic infused olive oil. Infused olive oil is a big trend, it's all the rage, and when you list it in your ingredients, it really makes it seem like you've done something elaborate and fancy, but really it's quite simple. So we're gonna have fun exploring that today. Our recipe comes from a blog this week called cheftarek.com, and in his recipe he outlines several different flavors of infused olive oil that you can do. His 5 favorites: garlic, basil, rosemary, lemon, and chili. We're just going to do one today because the method on all of them is very similar, almost identical in fact. So I happen to have some garlic on hand, so that's the one, and I think that's the one that I will find most useful in my own kitchen. So that's the one we're going to do today. The secret to good infused olive oil is quality ingredients. It's very simple, but you want a strong and robust flavor, and the best way to get that is with fresh ingredients. Also, you want to make sure you buy high quality extra virgin olive oil. Our recipe today is only going to use 2 ingredients, just the extra virgin olive oil and the garlic. We'll be using garlic in 2 ways. We'll be taking half of our 8 cloves and heating it with our olive oil. When we're done heating, we'll strain that garlic out, and the other half of our garlic will go directly in the jar with the olive oil and will be stored in there that way to maintain the flavor over time. We're gonna slice the garlic, so we're gonna get started with that, and then we'll be ready to go. Using our garlic, we're going to maximize the flavor by peeling it and then slicing it. So you could put it in as a whole clove, but you're not gonna get as strong a flavor as if you open it up by slicing it. While I'm slicing here, it seems like it's already the right opportunity to talk about why we chose this recipe and how it fits with our story this week. Olive oil was the logical choice this week for ingredient, partly because it's such a staple in Middle Eastern cuisine, as well as because of the nature of the story. So this story is about when Jesus has his feet anointed with oil or perfume by a woman. This woman is anointing Jesus' feet with really aromatic, beautiful, perfumed oil. So I thought it was only appropriate that we picked a recipe that sort of was adding some extra flavor and aroma to our oil, even if garlic flavored feet isn't maybe the perfume we go for in that exact instance. In our story, Jesus is been invited into a home to share a meal, as so often happens, as we've learned throughout his ministry. And this woman comes and takes this really expensive oil or perfume and uses it to anoint and wash Jesus' feet. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who are squeamish about feet. And to them I say, aren't you glad you live in the 21st century? Because man, oh man, feet were a lot grosser back in Jesus' day. Everybody wore sandals and hygiene was not the thing it is today. Back in ancient Roman days, there were troughs in the street for cart tracks, and people just tossed their sewage out into the street. So if you were walking, you had dusty feet from traveling in the desert, you had unsanitary feet from the things that people were tossing out there, animal waste from the fact that it wasn't cars that more wealthy people were traveling by, but horse-drawn or ox-drawn carriages. So the fact that this woman who doesn't know Jesus at all is willing to get up close and personal with his feet, let alone clean them and use her really expensive perfume oil is a big gift. And it is a real sign of faith and of love for Jesus that this woman is willing to offer this. And in Luke's version, this woman has lived a really sinful life. She has a lot that she's sorry for, and forgiveness, which Jesus offers her, means so much. And Jesus talks about that in this story, the idea, the parable of the debtors, that if someone has a lot to be forgiven, that they're extra grateful for receiving that forgiveness. So I think that's a really beautiful story, and I hope that the infused olive oil feels like a good fit for that story in your own kitchen as you're making this recipe with your loved ones and family. Maybe a great conversation topic is something that, how you would feel about receiving forgiveness, or about what you would do if you had that really fancy, expensive perfume. In all the versions of the story, the woman is scolded for using this really expensive, fancy oil to wash Jesus' feet. And I can relate to that. If I have something I perceive to be special or fancy, I really ration it. And so I can see myself doing that with this garlic infused olive oil. I really only want to make sure I use it in the right recipe and in something special, and just not in everyday things where no one's going to notice it. I'm trying to be intentional about that and live into that in my life. So I think, especially given this story and the experience of making this and sharing it together, I'm going to try and be really intentional about that in using my garlic infused olive oil just in anything and everything, and make sure it gets used and isn't just going to sit there and go bad in my fridge. Speaking of which, your olive oil, you want to minimize the bacteria. So for storing it, you want to make sure the vessel that it's going to be held in is really well sanitized. So mine's actually sitting in a pot here. We're going to boil it to make sure it's well sanitized. And that you're using really clean instruments for your work today. So I've got my garlic here. You can see I've got it all sliced up. So I'm going to take half of it and put it in my pan. And I have here measured a cup and a quarter of extra virgin olive oil. So we're going to turn our stove on to medium heat and just drizzle our olive oil in. So there it is. I'm going to let this heat and let the heat infuse the flavor from the garlic into the olive oil, since that's what it is. It's garlic infused olive oil. So my garlic is going to infuse my olive oil. I'm going to bring it up until it's just simmering. So you don't want it to really get too hot and smoke and burn. So till it's just simmering, and then we're going to cover it and let it sit and let that flavor really soak into the oil. The recipe recommends letting it sit for 2 hours. Mine's probably gonna sit longer than that because I hope to be asleep in 2 hours. So it's probably gonna sit for the night, and hopefully that's okay. And then I will strain it through my handy dandy strainer and then jar it in the morning. Starting to simmer, I'm gonna turn it right off. I've covered my garlic and olive oil. I just came up to a simmer, I turned it off. It's gonna sit there for the night, and I'll see you tomorrow morning to prepare the jar and infuse the rest of the olive oil. I'm excited. See you tomorrow. Sweet dreams. Good morning and welcome back to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. We've been allowing our olive oil to infuse with garlic flavor for 2 hours, or in my case, overnight. And now we're ready to jar it. So my jar, I've just been boiling in my pot in some boiling water to make sure it's nice and clean and sterilized. We are going to be storing it in the fridge rather than on a shelf. Taking it out of the hot water, I have just my my canning tongs to make that a little easier. So we have our jar out of the water, and I can get my lid out with the stick. So now we're going to put in the rest of the garlic that we sliced up last night that didn't go directly in the oil to simmer. So I put it in an airtight container overnight to keep it fresh. And I have my funnel here so to avoid things touching the sides. So that'll go right in the bottom there. And you want to make sure that whatever you put in your infused olive oil, whether that's herbs, whether that's lemon, whether it's garlic or chili, you want to make sure it's fully submerged in the oil. That's what's going to prevent it from going bad in your jar. My oil's not hot anymore. It was only simmering for a minute, and then we let it cool all night long, so I'm not worried about that being hot. But what we are going to do is strain out the garlic. So before pouring it through my funnel, we're going to pour it through the sieve. And my handy dandy pan here has a spout, so that works great for pouring directly out of the pan. With a 1.25 cups that we used, it's not going to fill this jar. I don't have something that's like the perfect size because my other jars, you know, the mason jar size one smaller than this is only a cup, and it wouldn't have fit all of it. So that extra airspace might not be ideal for storage, but I'm just gonna make sure I use it quickly, maybe in an Easter dinner that I'll be making in a week or two. Or even, like I said, I wasn't going to ration it, so maybe something, a regular weeknight dinner sometime before that. So here it is. Here's my jar. It's already cooled enough for me to touch. And so we'll just seal it up. And away we go. So look, how simple was that? That's definitely by far the most straightforward thing we've ever made on Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. But I think it's going to be really yummy and really flavorful, and add a little something extra to some homemade salad dressing, or garnishing some mashed potatoes, or maybe drizzling over top of some hummus or a different dip that we make. So drop in the comments below how you think you're going to use your infused olive oil. I'd love to hear about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week for our next installment of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Bye!